All right. Well, thanks, Rod, for joining and taking some time to speak. When did you actually announce your candidacy? Some of us and these other groups kind of stumbled upon you a little bit, but when was your official announcement to run as congressman? And also tell us a little bit about yourself, too.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So really how all this got going and how I decided to run and what really was the catalyst for a lot of this was, it was a little over a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, for the presidential debate here in Atlanta. I'm a TYT member and a TYT Army volunteer, and we were there for, to meet Cenk Uygur and the progressive crowd and all that, and met a lot of wonderful people that night. Met some people now that are in my life just as much as my wife and my children. And so, from there we've kind of come together, coalesced, and we decided to really go at this thing. But as far as like officially announcing, I believe that was I'm trying to even think what day is it. Yes, it was Saturday, and here we are. So, a little bit about myself. I grew up in East Cobb and West Cobb. So first I grew up actually in this district in Kennesaw, and then I went to Kennesaw Elementary. I went to Autry Middle, and then from there we moved to East Cobb. After my parents split, like all boomers did back in the 90s. And then, I grew up there, graduated from Walton High School, and from there I joined the Army. I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened. And I remember walking down the hallways and stepping into my homeroom and hearing everyone just start screaming. And it was, it's a very, very traumatic moment in my life. And I look up at the television and I see the second plane hitting the second tower. And from there, that was pretty much when I decided that I was going to join the Army. So, so I did that. I served for 8 years, a couple combat tours, stationed abroad in Germany. Can't compliment that experience enough. Being able to travel all over Europe and being able to experience a whole other side of the world was just probably the most enriching experience of my life. And then, so pretty much I'm in my late 20s. I'm really doing some soul searching, trying to figure out what it is I'm going to do with my life. And during my last deployment in Afghanistan, excuse me, we were getting some really heated fights with the Taliban, so a lot of close calls. And I remember the day very specifically where we had intelligence of these new foreign fighters coming in from Pakistan, as we were very close to the eastern border, and we were stationed in Logar province. And we're like, okay, yeah, sure, new fighters, okay, yeah, we'll be on the lookout. And I tell you what, Robert, these guys could shoot just as well as us. And they actually pinned us down. And it was one of the scariest moments of my life, as someone hundreds of meters away could shoot just as well as us. And they were hitting the sandbags next to my head just like I could. And I think at that point in time, I was like, I really started to reflect, okay, why are we here? What are we doing in this endless war? And is it worth it? And so, eventually I came to the conclusion that, I'm not going to continue serving in this military, in this Army, as an airborne infantryman. And then came home, moved to Midtown, and from there, you're kind of, everyone goes to college when they leave the service, when they leave the military. And that's what I did for a couple years. And I went to Atlanta Metropolitan College. I did really well, and I really enjoyed the science and mathematics, the whole STEM side of college, and I was just really enjoying it. And then I said, okay, this college has not challenged me enough, so I enrolled in Georgia State as a mathematics major. And I joined the Society of Physics Students, Really, every day was great. It was like an episode of Big Bang Theory. It was a lot of fun. And then I'm about halfway done with my degree, and I go speak with the guidance counselor, and I'm like, okay, this is getting for real. I'm in my very early 30s, and I'm like, I need to get serious about honing on a serious job and a serious career. And I'm looking at this guidance counselor sitting across from me, very unkempt and not a well-looking person. I'm sorry to say, and I'm not trying to be nasty about him, but if he was selling something, then I don't think too many people would buy it. And from there, I started looking into other avenues, and then my stepdad actually turned me on to the trades. And he's like, "You should go be a tradesman." And I'm just like, "Okay, well, let's look into it." So after a little bit of time of looking into the trades, I transferred my GI Bill benefits over to trade school, and I started studying to become an electrician. And then, after a few years, I graduated, and I am an IBEW Local Union 613 Journeyman Wireman. And I love my job very much. I love my local union, and it has afforded me the benefit of a decent pay, not just decent pay, I'd say good pay, great benefits, and I can take care of my family, and my wife and I we're I dare say we're comfortable, and that's a great blessing, and that's a great thing that we can say. So that's kind of where we are to this day.
Yeah, thanks for all that, because I know even for myself, I did not know much about you, but that definitely paints a very good picture. You are local, you're in the district, District 11. And actually, I wrote down a couple of notes as you went through that. Being in East Cobb or having ties to East Cobb, were you following the cityhood movement by chance?
I'm sorry, the what movement?
So the cityhood, East Cobb cityhood movement by chance?
Actually, you're the first I'm hearing of it.
Okay. So that basically, there have been, and still is, unincorporated Cobb County that includes East Cobb. And there was a movement that a lot of folks involved with it thought that it was just the real estate developers that were really pushing for it because there have been some notable projects that have taken a long time to get through the Cobb County zoning. And but actually it was breaking news today. It appears that they are pushing that off to 2021. So I was just curious if you with the ties there, but no worries, you don't have to dwell on that. But
no.
Next up, thanks for your service. My former stepbrother did not make it back from Afghanistan, so definitely.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What year was he there?
Oh gosh, I'd have to go back through. It's been a number of years ago. I have to find the exact date. But he was from South Georgia. The community down there has been overwhelmingly supportive of the family and everything. But definitely, glad you made it back, and thanks for all of your service there.
No, you're welcome. Do you know what unit your stepbrother was in?
He was a Marine in Afghanistan.
He's a Marine. Okay.
And
Okay.
I can share the news story with you, but they definitely have been very, very supportive of him down in South Georgia.
Yes, please.
And then also the union and lineman, electrician story. That's a great story to hear. I am not too different from, where you went through there. Actually, I remember back in high school, I had a dual diploma, both, college prep and vocational, but I do IT work through all of my degrees. I went to Kennesaw State, which actually I'm an alumni there after Southern Polytechnic. Which I think maybe in the district or close there, but Kennesaw State, assumed that later. So,
okay, great.
But just to share a little more detail there. But it's mostly about you. So the first thing that we wanted to get to was the current congressman in District 11 here. I'm actually going to quote this from a Newsweek story, and I'd like to get your response. So he was on the House floor yesterday, prior to the impeachment vote in the House, and this is the specific quote that is causing all sorts of stories and obviously what led us to this interview here. But when Jesus was falsely accused of treason, Pontius Pilate gave Jesus the opportunity to face his accusers. During that sham trial, Pontius Pilate afforded more rights to Jesus than the Democrats have afforded this president in this process. So this is actually your competitor. And so, thanks today to actually be willing to respond to that.
Certainly. Well, first off, on its face, that statement is 100% false. The president was offered every opportunity to come and testify in his defense. So, but of course, as a veteran, I can only say that man is a coward. But what Representative Loudermilk, what he's doing here is nothing new in extreme right-wing politics. If anyone has ever studied, the founders' works of this nation, they would understand that the separation of church and state was one of the foremost and utmost responsibilities that they were trying to press upon this new government. So, when these religious extremists are criticized for saying something ridiculous or bigoted even through their faith, they regularly cry, oh, religious liberty. But the hypocrisy, it's shallow and it's only skin deep. If even Robert, if you're like me and this holiday season, you're going to have some relatives over who might be a bit unwell when it comes to acceptance of diversity or these things, they can have the Fox News going and all that. I would encourage anyone listening to this to have a fun experiment. This would be great. If you know someone who is a Muslim, please invite them over. And right there in your living room, this would be a great thing to do around these sorts of people, is to bust out the prayer mats and go ahead and start the Adhan. And that's the Muslim call to prayer. Do that right there in your living room. So that's what you can do with that experiment is you can see the cry of the extreme right's religious liberty wanting is just hypocritical. What it is, it's don't criticize me is all it essentially is.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, call to action. And I've been seeing, candidates, like yourself, giving tips on how to deal with the family. I have to do that next week as well. And
certainly.
That is a very interesting call to action, and it can really flip the table sometimes, with how politics, definitely are going on these days. Thanks for that.
No, certainly. With dealing with people on the street or at work, my demeanor is a little bit more bullheaded and aggressive. Of course, when I'm speaking with persons and I'm trying to convince them of my argument, I generally prefer the Socratic method and walking them backwards into my conclusion, as we did in debate club and all these sorts of things. But with family, it's best to have kid gloves and be nice. But it's really hard when people are being awful not to stand up and say something. So.
Yes, certainly. And then also, I believe you said this earlier, but I actually did a quick little search on your competition's FEC website. And it's interesting as I look through the donor list, for your competitor. I'm just going to read off a couple of these companies. The NASDAQ, State Farm Insurance, First Data Corporation, let's see, USAA, the bank, I believe they're based out in Texas, TransUnion, Allstate, Southern Company. It's very interesting for you to go out, and I know this is one of the positions on your website. What is your reaction when you look through some of these companies that are giving to your competitor, and then relating that to what your messaging is?
So, if you're looking at this and you want to evaluate this from an economic standpoint, it's completely justifiable, and you can understand, you can completely empathize. You're like, of course, they want access to the man writing the law. Okay, why wouldn't they donate to his campaign? But if you completely flip the scenario and you look at it as a we the people representative, well, then it's flat on its face corruption. If you want to be a representative of we the people and you're just awash in corporate lobby money, then you are 100% compromised, and your ability to do your job is damn near out the door, and it's unacceptable. And that's why I have, in this campaign, completely 100% pledged off any corporate PAC money or corporate donor or corporate lobby money.
Yeah, and that's an interesting reaction to all that, and to look at it for for the lobbying interests and everything. It's quite interesting. I don't know if you've ever tried to contact your competitor. I certainly have, and there was one instance that his staffer actually closed the door in my face. So why are these? And not necessarily you have to answer this, but why are these companies basically buying the ears of the congressman? When I think, what was it, Romney said a while back, corporations are people. Well, that certainly seems to be, what the reaction are these congressmen and women, taking all this PAC money are doing.
Certainly. And, the pulse of the nation is populist. That's exactly how Trump got elected. He sold everyone a populist, I'm one of you, I'm going to work for you message. Unfortunately, he's a con man, and he was, lying out as what. But these companies, they do it because they can. It gives them leverage, and they're enjoying their profits as the legislative branch of this government is catering to them. And so, yeah, that's just, I'm absolutely not going to do it. So.
Yeah, and if I can find it again real quick, one of the contributions to your competitor there, $1,000 at the end of September from Santander Holdings. That's a Spanish bank. Why in the world is a Spanish, if I'm not mistaken, Spanish-held bank there contributing money to a congressman for a gerrymandered district here in Georgia? So that's just one extreme example.
Yeah, it is an extreme example, but if you actually drive around this district, you'll see lots of other interesting banks, like the Bank of Ozarks. And, you look at these banks and you're like, okay, that's really interesting. Bank of, and it's, so really these banking institutions, whether they're here or there, it doesn't matter, because they have to adhere to the law of the land of the jurisdiction that is here. And exactly what Representative Loudermilk does is he works for them. He takes their money and he works hard. He does a great job for them. But unfortunately, what he is doing is he is hurting the rest of us, as he is working tirelessly to gut Dodd-Frank and all the protections that we worked so hard for after the subprime mortgage crisis and the crash of 08, 09. Representative Loudermilk, he wants to work himself to the bone to make sure that all those banks can do all those things all over again. And so, God, man, that's when I hear myself saying that, I get fired up. I'm like, man, we've got to get this guy out of office. He's got his finger on the button. We got to get him out of the room.
Yeah, and a certain term, for D.C., for example, the swamp. I think this is quintessentially, what you're seeing is all of this, money going into these candidates, and they are still the swamp. I don't know that Trump did anything to drain the swamp in D.C. whatsoever.
Certainly. So, I completely agree with that statement, and that's totally fair, and pointing our fingers at the Republican Party and saying, you're taking all this money as well. But we absolutely have to look at our own party, the Democratic Party, and especially as us new wave progressives are coming in and we're starting to take the helm. We absolutely need to hold our own accountable. So what is it? Just 2 years ago, there were just a handful of people in the House that swore off all corporate PAC money. And I think nowadays, is it near 50? And it's, on a single term basis, that is exponential, especially when you're looking at a House of Representatives, and that's amazing. And that's the finger of the pulse on the nation, man. We are hungry for populist change. We want it, and we want it now.
Yeah. And so that is a good segue to go next here into healthcare. And, definitely that is one of the issues on your website. What are your thoughts here with healthcare in the United States and also in Georgia? I'd be curious to hear your response there about healthcare.
Certainly. So in the state of Georgia, we have the regular main competitors that have set up shop here. So as far as our state goes, we do not have the Medicare and Medicaid expansion under Obamacare or, the Affordable Care Act. As far as the Affordable Care Act goes, it was certainly a half measure, and me looking back on the entire instance, when you have your president, you have both houses, you have your supermajority. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I was a boxer back in the day. When your opponent's on the ropes, man, take them out. Don't take a step back. We could have, the Democratic Party could have at that time established a single payer Medicare for all platform, but of course they weren't ready. Now, as far as healthcare on a national level, we have to pass single payer Medicare for all. So my family, our situation, just almost 2 years ago, my daughter, she's almost 4 now, so she was, that was 2 years ago. She was in my lap. She was doing what toddlers do. She had a bit of a fit. I guess I told her she couldn't have a cookie or something, and then she threw her head back and she broke several of my teeth. That was almost $5,000 that, of course, we had to go into debt to fix my teeth. We just got that paid off. My stepfather has Parkinson's disease, and it is our job every single day to ensure that his quality of life remains at a standard that he wants to continue living. And most people don't actually know this, that one of the main symptoms of Parkinson's disease is dementia. And so he gets greatly confused, and he's actually wandered off and got lost a few times. That was my mother and he were downtown shopping, and we had to, I had to leave work, and I had to run up and down Peachtree Street yelling out the window, has anyone seen a long-haired older gentleman and with a cane? And it was really upsetting. And the latest thing that has happened in my family is my wife survived breast cancer this year. So she has had her mastectomies. She went through her radiation, and she's going through reconstruction next month. And my wife is a wonderful, resilient, strong woman. She is a women's health nurse practitioner. So she is a rock solid feminist, and I love her every day more for being so amazing. The first thing you do, you get this news from the doctor. You're like, okay, the biopsy came in. Yes, you have breast cancer, DCIS. Lucky for her and us, it was the least aggressive, and we couldn't have caught it earlier. So she was doing the right thing, getting her regular mammograms and self-examinations, and as soon as it popped up, she got it. And so you're like, okay, all right, we're in this fight now. We got to handle this. And then, so then we go talk to the insurance adjuster. Okay, what is this going to cost us? How are we going to be able to do all this? How can we afford? And so, when you're sitting across from an insurance adjuster and they're telling you, we are so sorry this has happened to you. You have my full empathies. You have to get this confirmation MRI so that we can successfully target all the cancer to save your life. That'll be $6,400. Will that be cash, check, or charge? And what it is in a nutshell, our lives are literally leveraged against us in the name of profit. One thing that I've done as a union organizer, we have Cigna and we have Kaiser on our union health insurance plans, is one thing that I enjoy informing all my other union brothers and sisters at work. And I just sit and, we're working, and I say, hey, man, do you know what the executive pay compensation was for Cigna last year? And of course, they just smirk at me. And I tell them, like, okay, what if the CEO took home $1 million? Do you think that's fair? And they're like, oh, maybe. And I say $2 million. And they're like, well, maybe not. I say $3 million. And they're like, well, okay, now you're getting ridiculous. And I said, you know what, man, just keep going. just keep going up, 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 up. And that's what you and I are collectively financing. With our lives at stake, all of us in this privatized healthcare system are being leveraged in the name of extravagant wealth. And it's immoral. It's inhumane. We must pass single-payer Medicare for all.
Yeah. I mean, we could literally go on and on and on. I mean, I have my own story, but there's a gentleman on Twitter about a day or two ago. I'm going to quote him as Michael Saman. He said, imagine if Spotify was like U.S. healthcare. You pay $9.99 a month for premium for some music, pay $7 per song, listen until you spend $100. After that's included, it resets each year. Pay 49-cent copay for every listening session. And if you get fired, we cancel your Spotify and songs cost $999 a listen.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good analogy to see. And I've said several times, what's going on with U.S. healthcare is not sustainable either.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. And of course, the Koch brothers study, was it the Heritage Foundation that did that study? I'm probably misspeaking, but I am going to confidently say that there was a Koch brother funded study on this discussion of single payer Medicare for all, and they want to throw the sticker shock at everyone. Oh my God, it's $32 trillion over 10 years. Can you believe that? And any rational consumer, would be like, okay, what am I currently paying? And it's almost double. And it blows my mind. And you see people going on the mainstream media, and they keep yelling it from the rooftops. Why are you selling the sticker shock, man, when we're paying almost double? And do your job. Jeez.
Yeah. And then we pay so much, and then you look at the senior care quality report that the AJC put out. I'm not sure if you heard any of the stories from a month or two. The AJC, they're part of Cox Media, WSB carried this, but there's a couple of different links to, there's nursing homes, and then there are these homes that are in the middle, and there's memory care homes, and the state of Georgia has all these different provisions, but it did lead to, I believe he was a veteran that was in one of these homes, actually in East Cobb, if I'm not mistaken, and that led to a trial. And I think this was a case at Sunrise Senior Living, I believe, is over in East Cobb there.
Yeah.
Just tales of neglect and abuse in some of these cases. So it's so ironic that we were paying all this money, but yet some of the results that we're seeing from these different providers and facilities is just not acceptable.
Certainly, and I do remember hearing and reading that. It's my grandmother actually recently, just I want to say 5 years ago, passed away, and she was in the same facility, in the same light facility, but this was in Mississippi, and but my mother was she was a hawk, man. She was there, I would dare say, every week. Just being a quality control officer, if you will, and but luckily, we had a decent facility and some decent people looking after my grandmother, my mamaw, as we say in Mississippi, and but it really comes down to, what kind of society do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a society that says, you know what, if you're uninsured and your child gets cancer, oh well, it's hospice. Like, are you out of your mind? Like, if that were my child, I'd pull a John Q. I'd go rob a hospital. I'd go rob a bank. Absolutely, I would.
Yeah, and then also there's breaking news. Literally, I think it was yesterday. There was a federal appeals court that has now ruled the Affordable Care Act unconstitutional when it's already actually been up to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court called this a tax. They said that,
correct.
And I think they basically looked at it and said, you're either going to be paying this one way or another. But,
correct.
To continue to, pad the pockets of, for-profit organizations, it's just not sustainable. So we'll see where this goes, but I don't know if you saw the story and had any comments on that.
Yeah, I did. And, my initial reaction, is anger. Like, if you're not motivated to get out and vote, this is exactly what happens. People with ill intent will take power if you are not motivated to get out and vote and hold your government accountable. And then the second thing that happens if you are not motivated to get out and vote is those with moronic views will beat you at the polls. So you got to get out there. You got to hit the polls. You got to do your civic duty.
Yeah, and I think I even saw a comment on social media. Someone was making the comment, well, it's just best that we do not talk about politics and on social media or in person. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Do we need to go back to when Hillary lost and everybody was trying to beat that drum? No, if anything, you need to be 2 times as loud about politics. Speak your mind.
Correct.
Tell everybody where you stand on these things. And honestly, I remember going back to high school in South Georgia, bandwagon politics. If people, if they see the ship is sinking, they're probably going to get off that ship and move over to somebody else that makes more sense. So,
sure, yeah, it's it's frustrating, when people say, oh, don't talk about that, that's uncomfortable. To me, that's just I think that's a cop out. I say, please don't press my button. And like what was that movie from the 70s, Network, where I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Where you said you want to, all you want to do is say, please just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. And I love hearing that. So it gets me pretty fired up.
Yeah. And then so from here, got a couple of other issues, criminal justice reform, equality. We've already talked a good bit about the labor and jobs story there. But where might you want to go from here with our conversation? Which one of those 2, I guess, is more important to you?
I'm sorry, criminal justice and which other one?
It was criminal justice reform and equality were the others on your website here.
Man, that's stick me in a rock and a hard place, don't you, Robert? Goodness.
Well, you don't necessarily have to answer directly, but definitely we can talk about both if you have time.
Yeah, like which one's more important, LGBTQ rights or letting nonviolent drug offenders go? Like, oh shit, man. I guess criminal justice reform. Sure, let's talk about that. I mean, we absolutely have to legalize cannabis. Now, my stepfather, he has Parkinson's. And so we're kind of delving back into the healthcare discussion here. Without medicinal cannabis, he literally, his tremors are at such a level that without medicinal cannabis, his standard of living would be so poor. His lack of motor controls would be so low that, the conversations that we have had about the end of his life and when he wants to leave and when he wants to stop living would be at a much more severe level. And so not just legalizing the cannabis, but I mean, when you look at the entire scope of the war on drugs, it's just been a massive failure. And all it has done, from, the nonsense education of just say no, you're not addressing the problem. If people have substance abuse problems, okay, let's talk about it. But it's the same argument as like the abstinence education argument. Just say no. No, people like sex. We're going to have sex, okay? People like drugs. They're going to use drugs. Now, it all depends on what severity and what level. So cannabis is perfectly fine. It's perfectly acceptable. I remember the first time I smoked pot, Jesus, I think I was 15, I sat in the back of the car and, we had fun and we giggled and we ate and it was a great time. And then, even recently as an adult, I occasionally enjoy it. But, being a construction worker, I have to keep, my system clean in case something happens. And I tell you what's one of the greatest things you can do is have an edible and go get a massage. My God, that'll be the best massage you ever had in your life. But, but more so on serious topics, the war on drugs is destroying lives. People are being hurt. And it's it is an injustice, and we have to address it. And so the status quo is not okay. I spoke to a very conservative fellow the other night about the drug cartels and why he wanted to put up the border wall and all that nonsense. Excuse me. And, he's talking about the drug cartels and they're all powerful. And you'd be like, okay, so let's take away their largest cash crop. If you really want to hurt someone, punch them in the wallet. The old saying goes. And absolutely releasing nonviolent drug offenders. It makes me angry thinking about it. Like, okay, if you look at a person from a very poor neighborhood and their education is garbage, they're growing up, they don't see economic opportunity to climb. So what are they going to do? They're going to go to the economic opportunity that they can see available, and that if that is selling, weed on the streets, then that's what they're going to do if it's the only option that they believe they have. And then what happens? They get locked up for years. Well, that's horrible. Why would you lock someone up for selling a plant that doesn't hurt anyone when I can go to the store right now and buy all the alcohol in the world and drink myself to death and no one's going to stop me? So, but not even just cannabis per se. There are other countries that have instituted other programs, especially Portugal, I think is the golden child example, where they legalized all substances and their violent crime rate plummeted. Their actual usage rates plummeted. Their need for incarceration plummeted. It was a total success. And if you can see somewhere somehow that does it well, and of course, if you're not asking questions, then you just don't care about the issue. So the fight to legalize cannabis, guys, it's here. It's so close. But of course, if you would ask my opponent if he's on favor for it, I'd bet you $100 right now he'd say no. But but that's why he is on the wrong side of history, and that's why we got to remove him from office. And so we got to help people.
Yeah, and a story here related to several things that you mentioned. This was end of November. House Democrats, just since January, have passed nearly 400 bills, and Trump and
Correct.
Republicans and the Senate are basically ignoring them. Are there any bills in there that you might have studied that are just sitting and collecting dust while the other side just doesn't want them?
Yeah, man, fight for 15. Talk to me. Absolutely. Yeah, that is raising the minimum wage. I don't believe they tied it to inflation in the bill. I think it was just stop but raise, but I could be wrong. I need to read it more. As a union worker, as someone who understands the value of labor and dignity in the workplace, absolutely, man, we gotta raise the living wage. We have to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. And what gets a lot of slack back from my conservative union brothers, and they always bring the burger flipper argument back. Like, they don't deserve that because they just flip burgers. It's not, well, man, I tell you what, I've worked a grill before, and it's hard work. And when people tell me, oh, they don't deserve that wage because it's minimal labor. Well, if I see the entire building is wrapped in cars lined up to buy your burgers, then absolutely you deserve more because your labor is producing the revenue that is making people wealthy. So, a few years ago, I took a run at a business myself, and I worked at a pizza delivery institution. Let's just, I don't want to throw them on the bus here. Let's call them App Jim. And I'm sitting there one night watching this 16-year-old kid just slay in the oven. He's sweating. He's grabbing the stuff coming out of the oven. He's boxing it up. He's throwing it in. And this guy is working his tail off for upwards of 3-4 hours. And I'm sitting there doing the math on the amount of product that's going out of his hands. And my God, man, it was almost $10,000. $10,000 in revenue going out of this teenage boy's hands. And then I did the math and I'm like, oh my God, he's making $9 an hour. So let's say, just per se, he made let's just bump it up to 10 just to make the math easy and super conservative, that he made $40 before taxes for throwing out $9,000 worth of product. That is insane. And if I were a business owner, I couldn't go to bed at night knowing that I exploited someone like that. That would chew on my conscience to no end. So I know I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, and I'm sorry. I apologize.
No need to apologize. Just to document, the current national minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. And so if you do the math, that's around $15,000 a year. How can anyone live in the United States in 2019, almost 2020, on $15,000 a year?
Well, the simple answer is they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and then you actually, and you see it in Metro Atlanta too. I mean, you see the signs, start working today, get paid tomorrow, and you already see that the companies have to pay more than minimum wage already in some of these areas, especially Metro Atlanta and higher cost areas.
Right, and that's great. To a certain degree. If you look at, like people talk about the invisible hand of the market, first off, there's no such thing. As soon as Caveman 1 had more meat than Caveman 2, he had leverage, and the invisible hand was gone. It was in Caveman 1 with more meat. So the economy's changing, and the social pressure certainly is shifting, and that's a good thing. But simply put, it's too little, too late. My first job was I was 14, and I took a job at McDonald's right on Johnson Ferry and Lower Roswell Road. And that McDonald's is still there, and actually that's where I learned most of the Spanish that I can speak to this day. Hey, Belia, if you hear me, hello, thank you so much for listening. When I worked there, the minimum wage was $5.15, and that's what they started me at. And I remember so sharply, okay, the Big Mac meal was $2.99 on the menu. Okay. So if you look at today's minimum wage, $7.25, and you go to a McDonald's drive-thru now, the Big Mac meal is, I believe, just over $8. So the minimum wage has gone up a little over 35%. And the Big Mac meal price has gone up over 100%. And, and these corporations, these McDonald's, these Walmarts, they'll tell you all, they're like, guys, look, I hear you want to make more money, but we just can't afford to pay you more money. And, but then what do they do the next day? They turn around and they buy more of their own stock. For like McDonald's in the recent history, it was upwards of $20 billion, I think it was. And they turn around and they buy their own stock back, and then they want to turn around and tell the guy working the counter that we can't pay you more? My ass, man, that is labor exploitation. Absolutely, I'm going to fight every single day as a union man to bring those workers together. And if I can help them unionize, man, I'll do it tomorrow. I absolutely would.
Yeah. And then, so just to wrap up here, were there any other topics or issues that come to mind? We'll get on the recording here.
Sure, yeah. So we've taken, and thank you again so much for doing this, Robert. I really appreciate your time and what it is that you're doing. So we've been expecting a great deal of right-wing extremism blowback online, and it has already begun. I was contacted by a fellow veteran. He claims he was a veteran. I believe him. I'll take him at his word for it. And he looked at my Facebook page, and he saw that I took a picture with a young lady who had the American flag dubbed in the LGBTQ colors. And let me, I want to make sure I quote it completely accurately here, and it's a horrible thing that this guy said. Bear with me just a second.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have it written down on a piece of paper right here. So this fellow veteran, he goes on this long tirade, and what he, he's doubting that I myself am a veteran, and he's all but accusing me of stolen valor. And, like, okay, buddy, whatever. I know where I've been. I know what I've done. I don't need your approval. And so on his long tirade, this guy, he says, furthermore, I've never met a paratrooper that would be seen near the stars and bars modified to propagate abominations. And, my campaign manager responded telling him, you're a bigot. We're not going to talk to you anymore. And, of course I have her back. She's Devin Clifford is amazing. She's been just a rock star in this campaign. And, I tell him, of course, you are a bigot, and I'm not going to respond to any more of your posts either. And so when people with this magnitude of hate shine a spotlight on themselves, what I think is really important to understand is they're doing us a favor. And if we all turn around and put the social pressure on them to stop being so terrible, it works. It absolutely works. And so that's exactly what we're in the process of doing right now. So we have already reached out to this guy's employer, and we absolutely want to talk to this employer, and we absolutely want to say, hey, man, we need to make sure that you understand what it is that you're dealing with, because, one, no one wants to deal with a guy like that. But number two, not only for the purposes of economics and business growth here in the state of Georgia, if that guy gets out even further, man, someone like that can destroy your business. And, and I understand the economic argue is peanuts compared to the hatred and just the awfulness of someone saying something like that. But, that's just another day in the life in America right now. There are a lot of terrible things going on right now, and we need bold, progressive leadership to step up and take it on head on.
Yeah, and even more specifically, there's even some breaking news on this too, that a district court has requested documents from the Department of Defense about the administration's ban on military service from transgender people. And even further to take that, we have veterans who were promised citizenship, after their service, that our government just turned their back on them and threw them out of the country. These types of things, how in the world can, just the racist, it's just mind-boggling what folks are standing by and somehow justifying these acts.
Certainly. During my time of service, I actually got snagged up on a recruiting desk for 2 years. It's terrible. It was the worst job I've ever had. I would not recommend it to anyone. I mean, I came fresh off the streets of Iraq to the recruiting desk. And then I believe during that time, the recruiting command had the highest rate of suicide attempts out of any command in the Army, which is like, what in the hell? Like, hold on, we just came from war. And then you put us on a desk, and people are putting, guns up to their heads, and that's clearly a huge problem. But I specifically remember being coached on targeting immigrants when I was a recruiter, because, they need something to solidify their citizenship. And what better thing to do than to serve in the military? But going through the citizenship courts, certainly it's always up to the judge. You can serve in the military, and the judge can look at that and go, oh, that's great, thank you. But there's no black and white rule saying, like, I served 4 years and I get the stamp. No, there's nothing like that protecting these people. And, as a veteran, and as, if any immigrants are out there listening, please understand that just because you joined and served this military does not mean that this government is going to turn around and be there for you after you've been there for us.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful, potentially, to wrap up here. Were there any other topics that you wanted to talk about while we're together? Robert,
I think we've covered a lot, and, it's a lot to chew on. And, we'll just, say thank you so much. And, my team and I, we're going to go watch the debates tonight, and we got a lot of work to do. And, I need to get downstairs and spend time with my family before I head on back out of here tonight.
Yep. And just one more time to recap yourself, the district, and what are you running for there?
My name is Roderick Sellers. You can call me Rod. I'm running for Congress in Georgia's 11th Congressional District. I am the union member candidate, I am the veteran candidate, and I am the get money out of politics candidate. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob.